The wood room at Stockholm Makerspace is a well-equipped workshop. There is a hand tool section with a woodworking bench, some battery-powered screwdrivers with a collection of bits that we ask you to keep in good order. There are chisels, measuring and marking instruments, a modest collection of hand planes, a large wall with many different tools like rasps and files, more chisels, a collection of screwdrivers and hammers. There is a large central work table where you can lay out your plans and manage your projects. There are labeled drawers with nail guns, a biscuit jointer, hand sanders of different kinds, jigsaws and handheld routers. There are vacuum cleaners, which we ask you to make good use of. And then, in the other section of the room, there is a selection of fine woodworking machines that we'll get to in a minute. In this introduction video, we'll discuss the following. First, we'll introduce the dust collection system, which is where we particularly ask you to pay attention. Then we'll move on to handling instructions for the jointer planer, the band saws, the table saw, the bench sander, and finally the miter station. But before we get into any of this, we'd like to point out the air cleaning unit in the ceiling. It is switched on by remote control by the entrance door. We'll start out with something that you'll hear us talk about a lot, because at the center of the workshop, symbolically and physically, there is the dust control system. It consists of a large central unit which has a switch on its right-hand side. This switch should always be on. If it isn't, you turn it on as you enter the workspace. The central unit consists of a motor and filters and a bag that collects particles that otherwise would end up in your lungs and damage them. You'll excuse us for being very particular about the usage of the dust collection system. It makes the difference between an enjoyable time in the workspace and downright misery. There is a handle on the left-hand side of the unit which clears the filter inside the machine. Make a habit of pulling and pushing it every now and then. Then there is the dust collection bag. If the level of dust reaches up to half of the inspection window, then we ask you to change the bag. Let the machine be quiet for a moment in order for the dust to settle, then release the cart using the handlebar on the front, take out the old bag, dispose of it according to instructions on the wiki page, and then go and grab a new one. They're in a box to the left of the miter station and install it neatly. And why not give that handle a few pulls again while you're at it? Now, the clever thing is that the central unit of the dust collector is connected to a tube that divides into more tubes and then even more tubes that lead to dust extraction ports on all the machines that are known to produce a lot of dust. And then there is one that opens up to the floor, which you can use while sweeping. In connection with every machine that has a dust extraction port, because it needs one, there is a gate, a wooden handle, that opens up that particular section of the dust collection system and trigger the entire unit to start as they are opened and shuts it off as they are closed again. This is provided that the unit is switched on, which it is, because you checked as you entered the room. Now, we want you to make a well-established habit of always opening these gates before you start cutting or sanding anything on one of these machines. If we all do that, that is, always open the dust gate before starting cutting or sanding, until it becomes a rock-solid habit, then this will make a world of difference to the air quality of the woodroom. Furthermore, and we did warn you that we'll go on about the dust collection system, you want to check that the hose leading to your particular machine is actually doing its job. What you want is a good, healthy airstream. If this isn't the case, this is now your problem, and you need to troubleshoot. Hoses from saws, for example, are notorious for collecting small cut-offs that, with time, will trap sawdust and block the extraction. If you can fix it, do so. Now, harsh as it may seem, if the dust collection is not working on a particular machine, and if you can't fix it, you can't use the machine. You have to take a step back and accept the interruption in your project. Because here is the truth about small particles released into the air by high-speed wood-cutting machines. They cannot be swept up or vacuumed after the job. They'll stay afloat in the air for some time and then build up on walls and tubes and the tops of machines and sockets and all kinds of awkward, impossible-to-reach places, and then start flying around again as the air is moved, and eventually build up in the small crevices of your lungs, which you need to breathe. So there you have it. Being meticulous about the dust collection is key to keeping the space enjoyable and healthy, and will never apologize for pointing it out, again and again. If we have this established now, and if you are determined to do as you're told to develop good habits, then we can move on to the fun stuff that we are here for. So put on your ear protection and grab a pair of glasses, and we're good to go. Almost. Because if you are wearing gloves, which is nice to do when you carry pieces of wood, take them off, and never wear them inside the shop. They'll do nothing to protect you against sharp blades rotating at several thousand revolutions per minute, but they can be grabbed by the machines and pull your hand into where it should never be. If you are really prudent, you leave your wristwatch as well. A lot of woodworking projects will begin by you making a piece of uneven wood square, flat, true, and generally nice in the jointer planer. This particular machine combines the two, the jointer and the planer, and therefore requires some specific handling when changing between them. Regardless, it all begins with you opening the lid that protects the feed beds. Here is a good habit for smooth planing and jointing. Keep the surfaces well waxed. This is a powerful and potentially dangerous machine, and you'll want to push the wood through with minimal effort and maximal control. Now, beginning with the jointer function, the upper function if you will, first make sure the wooden dust collection box is installed underneath, and that the hose is connected, and that the bed it sits on is raised enough for it to collect the dust properly. Then you locate the fence on the pillar beside the machine, and place it so that it only leaves enough of the cutter head to accommodate your project. The fence is locked down into position by a single lever on the right-hand side, and you'll square it up and fix it at 90 degrees, if 90 degrees is what you want, which it typically is. This handle, on the right side of the machine, sets the height of the in-feed table. You'll adjust it to your taste for the project at hand, although probably never more than some 1, 2, or maybe 3 millimeters down. Now set the protecting lid so that it covers any part of the cutter head that is still exposed. Open the dust port on the back side, and you're ready to start the machine. Release the red button with a twist and press the black one quite firmly. You do the jointing operation in the manner that you've learned from proper courses or videos that go more in depth than this one, being mindful about all safety issues, and then you use your now flat surface to register against the fence for your 90-degree side. Now for the lower function, the planer. Set the guard back to cover the cutter head, remove the fence and put it back where it belongs on the central pillar. There is a brown lever underneath the outfeed table on the left side of the machine, which allows you to lift the outfeed table. Then fold up the dust collection unit with its locking knob and locate the big yellow dust collection funnel that hangs on the pillar next to the machine and connect it so that the small metal piece fits in its slot on the front side. You need to remove the dust collection box used for the jointer function and then connect the hose to the yellow funnel. You lift the lower feeder table up to suit your piece using the turn wheel next to the infeed. The automatic feeding mechanism is engaged by this handle being set to 1, and you are ready to run your material through the planer, probably taking repeated small cuts, perhaps a millimeter at a time, which is the nicest way, the way that gives you maximal control. To leave the machine in its idle position, disconnect the hose from the funnel, put the funnel back in its storage place, use the hose to clean the machine thoroughly, outside and inside, fold back the dust collection detail, fold back the outfeed table and make sure it's locked in place by its handle, fold down the grey protection lid, reinsert the dust collection box for the jointing function with its hose, and you are done. Now here is an important rule which we ask you to respect religiously. This machine relies on a set of small, very sharp cutters on a so-called helical cutter head. They're a pain to sharpen or to replace, and this machine is only meant for lumber that is clean and free of anything that will damage the cutters. Nails and screws would be the obvious disaster, but even sand and dust that the lumber might have picked up from lying on the ground or being handled roughly. So if you have the smallest doubt, use a less sophisticated tool, like for example the bandsaw, which we'll talk about next, to clean up your lumber from any rough surfaces, and let the planer do the fine job, and will keep the cutters sharp much longer. This bandsaw, the green one, is set up with a wide blade, which means it's set up for straight cuts. There is a fence, a bit fiddly but perfectly workable. Now, the bandsaw might be less exact than other machines, but it's the machine to use for working through thick hardwood. It gets a good torque from its large inner wheel, so use it to rough cut your wood or clean away any suspiciously scruffy surfaces, and leave the more precise machines to do the more precise and lighter cuts. This bandsaw, the red one, is set up with a narrower blade, which is better suited for curved cuts. Don't forget to vacuum thoroughly after use and reconnect the hose to the dust port. Now, here is a fine machine that will let you make very precise cuts if you handle it correctly, which you will have learned in one of the obligatory courses that we organize. But here is a general run-through and some reminders. Let's begin with some straight crosscuts. For that, we'll use the sled that slides along the blade for perfect control of the workpiece. You need to know about this knob. When it's pulled out and twisted slightly, it lets the sled move freely, which is what we want for our crosscuts. If it's turned again and clicks back into place, it will lock the sled down, which is precisely what we don't want just now. So leave it open and make sure the sled moves freely. If the parallel fence, the one on your right, is in the way, just slide it out of your way. There is no need to detach it. On the wall next to the machine there is a fence with a large angled piece of MDF attached. This is the 90-degree fence, and it's what you need for your straight crosscuts. Insert the small steel bar in the sled, then attach the fence by screwing the knob into the threaded hole in the steel bar. The fence should then be fixed to and move with the sled. Now raise the blade with a black hand wheel on the front of the machine just enough for the teeth to sit at, say, 10 mm above the surface of your material. Open the dust collection port and make your cuts. Don't let your fingers anywhere near the blade. Use a push stick to remove the cutoffs. To make several pieces the same length, use the stop on the fence. If instead you want to cut off pieces of the same length from one piece, use both fences as shown here, but make sure the parallel fence, the one on your right, is backed off from the blade. It is only used to set the length of the cut, not to guide the piece past the blade. If a narrow piece of crosscut wood gets stuck between the blade and this fence, the blade might grab it and send it flying across the room. Set your desired length and make your cuts with full control. If you are cutting along the length of a piece of wood, let the parallel fence guide it past the blade, but do not use the 90-degree fence at the same time, and remember to use push sticks to stay safe. If you detach the turn wheel from its knob and instead attach it on the other knob on the left side of the machine, it will angle your blade up to 45 degrees. Set it at your desired angle and make your angled cut. There is a locking knob on the angle plate that can be used to make sure the blade keeps its angle. Because of the nature of the mechanics in the machine that hold the blade, it's mostly needed around 22 degrees. The crosscut fence that hangs next to the 90-degree fence is for miter cuts and other angles in the horizontal plane. It has its own metal slider and is fixed to the sled as shown here. Set it at your desired angle and make your cuts. Make sure the parallel fence is out of the way. Leave the machine as we hope you found it. Fences on the wall, blade lowered, the sled locked down, and all the dust that wasn't taken care of by the dust collection system cleaned up with a vacuum cleaner. The bench sander is notorious for filling the air with hazardous dust, so be extra prudent with its dust collection. If you're working on a small piece, keep it close to the collection port on the left side. It is a much less dangerous machine than some others, but there are guiding rules to avoid sending pieces flying or getting your fingers injured. Look them up, it's well worth your time. If you release this handle at the back of the machine, it will turn into a horizontal bench sander. There is the rounded edge, 70 millimeters in diameter, that can be used for an inner radius, but do be mindful about dust collection here and rearrange the hose, since you are now a long way away from the extraction port. When you're done, put the machine back in its vertical position, clean it, and leave it ready for the next user. The miter saw will let you rough cut material very efficiently and is the one to use to cross-cut long pieces that would otherwise not fit in the table saw. It lets you cut at right angles, and by loosening the black knob and the red lever as shown here, you can set it at other angles as well. It's got a laser, which you might find handy. It is switched on by the small button on the back side of the handle. This is another machine that will happily poison the air unless you are mindful about its dust collection, so be that and clean up when you're done.